Hello and welcome to the Empath Zone podcast, where we discuss various topics about being an empath and spirituality. I'm Gary Leigh, and I'm an empath and a healer, and I also run the Empath Zone and all the websites associated with it. Today I've got Jennifer Harris with me. It's just the two of us today. Normally we have another, but she's with her family at the moment, so rather busy. So hi Jen, how are you?
Hi, doing good. Good day today.
And your specialty is in demonology, right?
Correct. I specialize in demonology and pretty much anything to do with things that go bump in the night.
My specialty is healing and psychic attacks, empowering people, and dark flower remedies. I'm an expert at that. Use that to heal a lot of people. Today's topic is about synchronicity, which is a really fascinating topic. I think we probably could talk about it for a long time. Possibly I could make a second podcast of it. Let's begin. Over to you, Jen.
Well, when we're talking about synchronicity, how it affects us in our lives, today, tomorrow, in the future, what exactly is synchronicity about?
Well, actually it was a term which I believe was coined by Carl Jung, and it's about meaningful coincidences in your life. In other words, these are the events, the meeting with people, the lucky coincidences which propel you forward on your chosen path. Synchronicity has been written a lot about over the years. In fact, people who were listening to music in the early 80s probably remember the album by the Police called Synchronicity, which was actually all about what synchronicity was. Well, not every song, but it did have, I think, 3 parts to it.
Alright.
And then it really took wings when the Celestine Prophecy came out, which was all about synchronicity.
Now, pretty much we have talked about a lot about the Celestine Prophecy. To be 100% honest, I have not read it yet. I've only browsed. So, the Celestine Prophecy is what helped you get into all of this, correct?
It was what made everything come together. I mean, I was doing all this way before the Celestine Prophecy. Mm-hmm. But everything that happened to me since about 1996 was because someone had either read the book or had gone to the Celestine Vision chat room, which no longer exists. But at the time it was around for 9 years, and all the people that came there had something of importance to share or people to connect to. So synchronicity in its basis form is that you get to find out the information that you need in order to do what you need to do in your life. And the more aware of it you become, the more it happens and the faster it happens.
So when you are synchronizing with someone, that means someone else has a strength that you lack, and they help you through it?
No, that's not quite how it works. They have information that you need, or they might be a soulmate you just happen to find by pure coincidence. It means that before we come here, we decide what we want to do, if we want to experience certain things. If we want to choose a certain path, and then we make agreements with certain beings to be in our lives. Synchronicity is basically the realization of those people coming into your life in seemingly coincidental ways, but nothing is ever random. So people who find me, people who maybe come across this group or read my books, and they say, it just happened randomly, or someone recommended it to me, or the book fell off the shelf into my hands, which is interesting because this happens a lot with the Celestine Prophecy. The book, people give incredible stories about how they got the book. Got knocked off the shelf and nobody was there, and that's synchronicity.
That's really interesting.
Those are the coincidences that are actually pre-planned on some level.
So before you come here, you pre-plan all your life.
Yes.
And who you're going to run into to teach you certain things. And when you find certain synchronicities in your life, then it will continue to progress you to where you're supposed to be in the lessons that you needed to learn during that life, correct?
Well, the experiences. Not so much lessons. I mean, if you want to learn lessons, you can. Generally, we know everything, so there's no need to learn lessons, but we haven't experienced everything. So synchronicity will allow you to experience certain things. For example, I came here with a very specific agenda to awaken, to remember who I was, to remember why I was here, to find my soul family, to learn what I needed to remember in order to deal with the problems which had been generated before I came here, and how to deal with them. Every event in my life has taken me forwards to that. So you take out a link and everything tends to fall apart. So, for example, you met me in my chat room and you told me there was something that sort of kept you there. Now, that's synchronicity in action, because what you were doing was following something that had to happen. If it didn't happen, then certain other events couldn't happen.
So if you hadn't have set up the chat room, then you and I may have never met.
It would have been a lot harder, and the reason I set up the chat room is because I was creating a new chat room from a old chat room, the Celestine Vision chat room, which I foresaw was going to crash and burn. Synchronicity arranged somebody say, I want a chat room. I thought, okay, I'm going to do the chat room because that felt like the right thing to do. And then a few months later, the Celestine Vision chat room died a horrible death. But everything continued on in my chat room. So all the synchronicities that had been happening previously continued on in the new chat room, and I kept on meeting new people and getting new information. Eventually, everything that I experienced in my life was because of all these linked events.
So synchronicity is your linked event that you basically planted a seed and waited for it to grow.
It is, and everybody's got to do their part. So all these people who you meet in your life, it's not random, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. They might find the love of their life, they might find a partner, they might come across an enemy. It's all agreed to on some level. But the actual events that take you there seem to be pure coincidence.
They do seem very coincidental. Like for me, when I first came into your chat room, I was in this group, and I'm not going to say the group. They had a great chat room. I was moderator in that chat room, and the main person that owned the site decided to get rid of the chat room because it was very hard to moderate from off-site, so they wanted to bring it onto the site, and so they were closing it down. So I went looking for things that I wanted to see in another chat room. I just so happened to come across yours, and yes, I was very ego-driven a lot of times, because when I'd go in there, I was playing moderator, even though I wasn't a moderator, but my brain setting says you're a moderator, you need to act like one.
Yes.
And so, Omen kept reminding me, you're not a moderator here. You can go wild if you want. I'm like, no. Omen, you don't understand. I can't. And Omen's like, just let it go. I'm like, no. Something's going to happen eventually that's going to look bad on me if I do. And he just kept pushing me, and I kept pushing him off, and it's like, after he disappeared on us, that's when you and I actually started talking and getting to know each other, and then things flourished from there. I mean, we worked together really well now.
Yes, and I just happened to see a certain incident that was happening at the time. It caught my attention by random chance, which actually sparked that. So, in the scheme of things, it seems like it's a coincidence, but in the whole, in synchronicity terms, that was a synchronicity that happened. The fact that I saw what I needed to do, or what I needed to see, in order to then spark that connection between you and I, then I was able to bring you on board, and we were able to talk and get to know each other. But if that incident had not happened, if that sync had not happened, then the link would have been broken, and the next part could not have happened.
Exactly. And then I wouldn't have ended up in Alabama with you, Marty, which was like the most perfect time of my life. besides my children, was going there. The things that had happened during our visit together just solidified everything.
Exactly. And even the events that happened during that particular visit, you might say were just coincidental, but they were synchronistic. A lot of things happened, and I don't really want to go into it now because it's still fairly fresh and I have to decide whether I want to talk about it or not.
Exactly.
But if you were to put it into a Hollywood movie, people would say, hey, that's just too contrived. And that's the thing about synchronicity. If you pay attention to it, and if you take notice of what is going on, and more things happen until they get to the point where it's happening on a daily basis, it will seem contrived. You tell your story to someone, or if you put it into a movie script, they'll say, come on, real life's not like that.
Well, you know, with my life, I honestly, even looking back at my own life, it's like, okay, where did I get that idea from? I was like, no, that can't be someone's actual life. No, my life would be like a horror movie, I guess. And
That's true, yes.
A constant. And every time I would take one step forward, something would happen and I'd end up being 2 steps forward. And then something would happen, I'd be 3 steps forward. And
Exactly.
it was like running down a hill right into what was going on. And you can't stop when you're running down a hill. There's no way to do it.
Well, I'll give a few examples of my own synchronicity, and I could probably go on for days because there's just so much. I literally cannot remember half of them, or most of them nowadays. But way back in 1980, when I was trying to do as much research into metaphysics and mind powers as I could, I was in the library and I came across a book called The Powers of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. I felt a draw to it. So I went out, borrowed it, read the book, and it really spoke to me. Anyway, the whole concept of the book is that you can manifest things by suggestion. So if you want to manifest something, you'll give your suggestions to your subconscious mind, and that subconscious mind will react. So I really believed everything I read in that book. First of all, I thought, okay, I hadn't studied for this test, and I'm a really crappy student, and it was a PE test on the theory side of things. So I said to myself, my subconscious mind will allow me to retain all the memories of my study, so I will pass the test. I think that was the highest grading test or result that I ended up with, because all the information tended to be absorbed. And I thought, that's amazing. When I was studying, I thought to myself, I'm hungry, I'm going to go out and get some chicken for lunch. And so I checked my intuition, which I sort of assumed was my subconscious mind, and I felt, no, not yet, I'm going to wait. And then a few hours later, I suddenly felt, okay, it's time to get going. So I got going, got my chicken, and on the way back I met these 2 people who I knew from school, but I wasn't friends with. And I was riding my bike, and they were riding their bike, and one of them was somebody who I really didn't get along with, and the other one was this guy who I never really spoke to at all. They were riding together, and somehow they had sort of met up in a synchronistic fashion. And because I didn't like him, I decided, okay, hi, bye, and I rode back home, which will be around the corner. Well, they decided to go and follow me. So, to my surprise, we all started talking. Then they apparently liked me enough to want to return the next day, and that's where a lifetime friendship started to develop, at least with one of them. And those people became very significant in my early life for moving me along my path. Now, one of them, his name was David. I'm still friends with him today, and he was actually the one who I considered to be my nemesis at school, because he was always giving me a hard time. And back then I was pretty traumatized and I had a lot of issues to deal with, so I didn't know how to relate to people. I was in year 11, back then they called it Form 5, but it was year 11, and even though I had passed, I had too many people who were going up into the class, so they wanted to keep the lower scoring people down. And I happened to be one of them. And the reason why my score was so low is because my father had actually passed away that year, and for half a year I was sort of trying to cope with that without any support. And so they said, we're not going to let you up, you're going to have to repeat year 11. So David, who I just became friends with, was in the same situation. and I was considering going to this school called Swinburne Technical School, and he was going to go to the same thing, but he was going to go to the year 12 equivalent of that, and I was supposed to do year 11. So he came over and said, hey, do you want to come with me? And I said, sure, why not? I went with him to apply, and I ended up in the wrong section. I ended up in his section where he was applying to actually get into this course for year 12. I filled out the forms too. And the irony was that I got in and he didn't. So I ended up doing year 12 at Swinburne, which was a really great school year. And I also met another lifelong friend there. His name is Glenn. We don't really have a lot in common on a metaphysical level. He introduced me to many concepts like Taoism, philosophies which I would not have been exposed to otherwise. After that year, I then had to work for half a year because I didn't know what I was going to do. So I left Swinburne, even though I passed, and took a job as a sandwich hand, and that opened up new doors for experience. I was able to get experience which I wouldn't have got otherwise. And then, because I had that job, it allowed me to go back to school for another year. And then after that, I got my first office job, which they said, because you had the experience of making cappuccinos as a sandwich hand, we're going to give you this office job because sometimes we need backup in the kitchen. And I had that.
Awesome.
And I had that job for 4 years until Synchronicity sort of forced me to go and look for another job. The synchronicity was that my mother had me pick up these sausages. They were Dutch sausages or rookworsts from a butcher which happened to be very close to where I was working. By that time, finished the night job, I was unhappy and I wanted to move on anyway, but the staff were begging me not to go. So I said, okay, I'm not going to go. But I picked up the rookworst, popped it in the kitchen where it was cool, and there was this whole to-do about what this box of sausages was doing there. Did anyone know about it? And I was too busy working because I had work to do. I mentioned to one of the staff, hey, this box of sausages is mine, thought no big deal. And so my boss, his name is Gary too, by the way, he came and said, why didn't you tell us that this was your box of sausages? I said, oh, nobody asked me. And he exploded at me. He said, nobody asked me. What a stupid thing to say. You and I are going to have a talk tonight. So I thought to myself, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to resign. I didn't have another job to go to, but when we had... Yeah, so when I had this talk with him, he was telling me, oh, your work's really substandard. People are complaining about you, blah, blah, blah. I said, if they are, then I want names because I know I do an amazing job. He said, oh, no, I'm always defending you, blah, blah, blah. And I thought to myself, enough. I said, okay, if you're not going to tell me, I resign. And he said, oh, do you really think that's a good idea? I said, well, obviously we aren't going to get very far here, so here's my resignation. He said, how about you think about it and we'll talk about it tomorrow. But the thing with me is once I say something, I rarely ever go back on it.
Unless somebody actually gives you a really good reason why. Exactly.
But I knew it was time. Even though I didn't have another job, I resigned. So the next day he said, well, what's your answer? I said, I'm sorry, but I'd rather leave while we're still on good terms. So the resignation went through and I started looking for a new job. And the next week I got a job at a shipping line. And that shipping line not only helped further my career, but 9 years later, there was a redundancy packages being offered. They needed to downsize, and so they were offering redundancy packages for people who wanted to take them. Because the company was being sold and nobody knew what was happening, and everyone was just hanging around for years waiting to see what was happening. Sorry.
Was that the job that you had that actually paid for all these websites?
No.
Okay.
This was back in the 80s and 90s.
All right.
Okay. So the first time this came around, I was just finally starting to understand a little bit more about intuition and how to trust it and how things were meant to be going and how synchronicity worked. And so I wanted to go for the first round of redundancies, and one of my co-workers, she made such a fuss about how important we were that we were all sort of said, no, you're not going, we need you here. And I was really angry. I thought, how dare she do that to me, and block me. But then I checked my intuition and I thought, hey, this doesn't feel right. It's not time. And so I let it go. Then 6 months later, the same thing happened. And so I thought, right, this is the right time. So I put my hand up. This time I got accepted. And the interesting thing was they had 6 positions that needed to be made redundant. And only 6 people put their hand up, including me. After I got accepted, everyone started saying, oh, I should have applied for that. I should have done this. But I thought, obviously you weren't meant to.
Right. Because
So,
they would have.
yeah. So I walked away with a really hefty sum, which then allowed me to take some time off. I ended up traveling. I met my ex-wife back then in a very synchronistic way, and I might go into that in just a little bit because it's a really fascinating story. Then eventually, I ended up in my new job, which I stayed for around 17 years. Once again, it eventually wound down and everybody was suddenly made redundant, so I was able to take another package just in time for me to get myself another job with a company called Seaway. I told them, hey, I'm not going to be here for much longer because me and my partner, we're probably going to go to America and see how it works out there. They said, that's fine, we know you're a great worker and we're happy to have you as long as we can. The money which I got from redundancy has allowed me to sort of do what I need to do here without having to stress about money. I was able to pay for all the expenses and still have enough left over for me to live on a low income. Not have to worry about work.
At that time, how did your spiritual synchronicity happen or work through the jobs and everything? How did that work out with you?
Well, the jobs were the things that allowed me to actually do the websites and sort of be in a position where I could actually focus on that at the same time as I was working. So I was in a very fortunate position where I was each job I was in, I was able to make into a situation where I could do my own stuff while I was doing other people's actual work. My quality of work was extremely high. Not only was I able to do very, very high quality and very efficiently, in fact I always did the job of about 2 or 3 people, I was also backing up IT. I was also able to use that time to focus on other things on the net, which under a normal job I would not have been able to do. So
how did your spiritual growth happen through that? Because you were working like crazy, you were weird hours, I know, and everything was going wrong but right at the same time. How did you cope with your empathy and understanding your intuition and stuff like that?
Well, that was what the job allowed me to do. So I was earning enough of a wage for me to then focus on all the things that was going on in my spiritual life, and which mostly had to do with the chat rooms and the groups which I set up.
All right. So you, at that point in time, you weren't having personal growth?
I was. Every year from 1980, even beyond that, was a important year for me. It had definitely, there was personal growth, and the personal growth just happened as a matter of course. Like, I would meet the right people at the right time to get the right experiences in order to awaken myself. It'd be like a scripted movie. People enter the scene, do what they need to do, say what they need to say, I'd have that experience with them, and then they exit out of my life at the appropriate time. And then somebody else will come right in after them doing exactly the same thing. So everything was tied in a synchronistic way.
So once you were able to set up your shop or your site and work at the same time, you also had personal issues with a new wife and a new stepdaughter. How did that tie in with your synchronicity and spiritual growth?
Well, it allowed me to understand more about who I was, what I wanted, more importantly what I did not want. Allowed me to move into a space where I could grow, both as a person and as a husband and stepfather. So
Nice.
I learned a lot because of that. It also was the reason I discovered I had sleep apnea, and I was always tired. And once I was able to find that out, then I was able to get that treated, and my energy levels were way, way better because of it. That meeting with my wife actually unlocked a lot of things, and even though the relationship had a limited tenure on it, after being married, I was a much more complete and healthier person than before. It helped enormously with my growth. And the story of me meeting her is I used to be on IRC, on a server called Delnet, back in 1995. For some reason I had a real pull to get onto the net, and even though nobody else knew what to do and there was no software available, I went out and bought myself a modem anyway, and I spent about a month trying to get on. And
So what year was that?
1995.
95. Okay, I remember computers back then. Yes, they
That's
were
when
horrible.
that's when Windows 95 came out, and I thought, okay, maybe this might be the time to get on to the internet, because at the time it was being demonized by the media,
Yes,
as being a
definitely.
place for predators and pedophiles, and I thought, okay, well, it can't be that bad, and that sounded interesting.
Okay.
So I got on, discovered IRC, and I was amazed by it, because until then, the only communication I had before was email, and here are people talking in real time. I thought, this is amazing. And then I came across this chat room which was run by Netscape. I thought, okay, there are people talking here and they seem to know each other, but a few days later the Netscape chat room shut down. And so I started trawling for the documentation, and I came across a server which is called Xanth at Delnet. So Xanth is actually Xanth. It was a series of books written by an author called Piers Anthony,
I
which
love that author.
and I was really into reading those books. So I thought, okay, maybe they discussed Xanth there. So I logged on and found that I had gotten to Delnet, and I became immediately addicted. And I chose the nickname the Phoenix, which my guides pretty much insisted I should do, because it was
They've been very insistent about that name.
because it was the early days of Delnet. Nobody had claimed it yet, so I was able to claim it.
Okay.
Anyway, about a year later, after meeting these amazing people online, I, for some reason, decided, I wonder who the nick owner of Phoenix is, because that's the one I tried to get initially, but it had already been owned. And even though I had met the person previously, I wondered if it was the same person. So I put it into my notified list. And as soon as it came in, I noticed that it was in this chat room called Phoenix Lair. So I came in and I spoke to the person who was there, who happened to be a lady called Renee. And that was the lady who I eventually brought over in marriage. She was in America and I was in Australia at the time. But she was sharing the nick with another guy whose name was Tyler. And he was using Phoenix as well. And he had stolen the nick from the previous owner. And so they were sharing the nick. And because I was using the Phoenix, there was a sort of synchronicity going on there. So not only did I end up bringing her over, marrying her, but Tyler ended up being brought over to Australia on a education visa, yes. Because of him taking that nick and me putting it into the notified screen, 2 or 3 lives ended up being changed completely. All for that little incident. And that's the thing, those little minor incidences, those are the synchronistic events which make everything else happen. That's just a few of the stories which sort of define my life.
It's also very similar to the way you met Mari as well.
Oh, yeah.
Which couldn't be there, unfortunately. But she, she had that, what was it, Phoenix Rising?
Phoenix Rekindled.
Rekindled, that's right. Phoenix Rekindled, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I should talk to this person.
Yeah, she said she chose a nickname very carefully because she felt it was going to be important. I had just sent out a soul call previously saying, I was looking for other Phenite to come and find me.
Right.
And she answered. We connected immediately and we've been friends ever since.
Right. And of course, my nickname is Dark Shadow, aka Eclasia as well.
Yes.
So When we first met, it was Dark Shadow, and you stayed away from me as far as you could get away from me because my nickname was Dark Shadow.
Yeah, because I a lot of negative experiences with people with their nickname.
Exactly.
But the timing was wrong. And this is the thing about synchronicity. Synchronicity is all about timing.
Yep, I agree completely.
And so when events are meant to happen, synchronicity allows the timing for the events to be perfect.
Now, we've talked about the past and a little bit about what is going on now. So how does synchronicity help us for future endeavors?
Well, synchronicity is more about being in the moment. You can't have the future endeavors until you actually do what you need to do now.
Okay.
So you take out a link off the chain, it all falls apart.
Right. So what you're saying is that synchronicity is a now event.
Yes.
What happens now will affect our future, but we cannot go and say, well, this is what's going to happen in the future from the synchronicity because it hasn't happened yet.
It's a bit like you want to become, say, an airline pilot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you want to go to school. You just can't leave out the school part and jump to being an airline pilot. You need to actually go for all the things that will require you to become one. And
so in the future, you're going to be able to do your goals when you have these synchronicities now.
Exactly. It is the synchronicities which lead you to your next part of your life. And then once you get to the next part, a new synchronicity will occur, which also will take you to your next part of your life, and so on. So synchronicity is all about being aware of what's happening now and following your intuition.
So someone that wants to find synchronicities in their life, all they have to do is be aware of their surroundings.
Yes, be aware of all the events that are happening. When they feel something or pull for something, then they should trust that. If they meet someone who feels like a lifelong friend, even though it's the first time they've met, then listen to that. If they come across someone who feels like an enemy or they don't like him, also listen to that. But sometimes those people can give you information that will help you to remember who you are and why you are here. So not every nemesis is bad. It's just a matter of what you're trying to do.
Exactly. I've had some pretty horrible nemesises over my lifetime, but I would never go back and go back and do something that would cause that event not to happen.
Exactly.
Because I've grown, I've learned, I've figured things out because of these people that are, quote, the enemy.
Yep.
Doing what they did. It just made me even stronger.
And that's the whole thing. It's about how you grow spiritually, and it doesn't matter what experience you're having, even though it seems out of your control, it is still not random.
Right. Now, if, let's say, we had a synchronicity today.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm just putting it out there. You and I you were going to be late today. I was stuck in Hood River, and I was like, we're going to be late, and I come running back and got stuck in traffic, okay?
Yes.
Well, when I finally got home, you were ready to go when I was home. So it was like, oh, I just made it, I'm late. And then you're like, oh, well, you're just on time because I'm late.
Exactly, because we were supposed to start at 5, but I actually had a client at 4 to 5. So I said, okay, I'm going to make it half an hour later. But if
that was
said,
my fault.
But if we had said, let's go at 5, and you would have been stuck in traffic, then we would be late. So synchronistically, it all worked out perfectly. And that's the thing with synchronicity, it makes things work out perfectly.
It was my fault, technically, for the delay, because I double booked Gary. So, yeah, that was my fault, but we won't go into that.
Yeah.
But everything happens in sequence in my life and your life, considering we're working together. And so everything that happens to me happens to you in the same way, so that basically we come together at the same time, because that's what it's supposed to, right?
Exactly. It's basically synchronizing events so everything happens the way it's meant to do.
So like
And
synchronized swimming.
yeah, and there are people who are going to be listening to this podcast, and they're going to think, "Hey, this describes my life. I just happened to come across this podcast randomly." No, you didn't. Everything that you come across, everything you see, everything you do, it is not random. It is meant to be. You are just being guided by a higher force, which is what you have agreed to do in order to get to what you need to do. And the thing about your life, if you look back on your life and you think, would I change anything? If I could go back and do it all over again, would I change anything? And personally, I would have to say, no, it's just too much work. If I had not lived any of these years away, if I had decided to miss it all out, then I wouldn't be here today doing what I'm doing. And I don't know what I'm going to be doing, in a year's time, but I'll be exactly where I need to be.
Right.
Synchronicity is all about being exactly where you need to be at the right time.
I completely wholeheartedly agree with that. And even though, let's say even Mari, her plane, she's going to her grandmother's birthday party, and her airplane was late, delayed.
Yeah.
Well, she was afraid she was going to make her connecting flight. Well, her connecting flight was delayed too, and so she made it just in time, so everything worked out just perfectly in her favor. And that's a lot of like what happens today. It worked great in our favor, and yesterday it worked great in our favor, and so every little bit helps, and you're like, get more confidence in yourself, your abilities. Oh, well, my intuition says I need to leave the house 15 minutes early because otherwise I'm going to be late.
Yes.
Or, like for me, I get an upset stomach and I feel nauseous, and I know that's a signal of you stay where you are until that subsides before you leave, because something bad's going to happen.
Exactly, and there are countless stories of people who have missed flights or stayed home, the day of a really bad massacre, or they've missed out, being in a plane crash. There's even some who didn't go into Titanic due to circumstances. There's everything that happens. It might seem like it's a really frustrating thing to experience, but it could stop you from being in an accident. It might make sure that you're in the right place so you meet that specific person.
Similar to when we went out. We were out really super late one night, and Gary, Mari, and I decided to stop and have dinner at like 1:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
And we were just sitting there talking, and I just had that gut feeling. We need to walk or pay our bill and go out in the front. I went ahead and walked out first, and I stood out there for a minute, and Mari just so happened to have to use the restroom, so she went back into the store on the other side. And she finds her mother-in-law's neighbor stranded there because his ride didn't show up.
And we were able to give him a ride back, and this is 1:30 a.m. in the morning, and all because I decided I want to have something sweet. And then when I got to the restaurant, it was a Denny's, I decided, no, I don't, I'll just have a normal meal.
Yep. Everything that we did during our vacation lined up. Everything that happened was synchronized with each other, and the people that we were meant to influence or get to know throughout that whole time. So we were out one night driving around, and just so happened to stop in front of a building, and an incident happened, and we actually made friends with the people, and now they're really good friends with Mari. That was like another synchronicity that we had that actually caused things to start rolling.
And that's just one typical example of thousands upon thousands of them in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean. The more aware you become of it, the more it will happen.
So it happens whether you're not aware of it or not. But when you're aware of it, you see this pattern and you are able to say, okay, this happened, this happened, this happened. Otherwise, you're just walking through life blind.
And that's the thing, people who worry about not meeting their soulmate or their partner or being alone needn't worry, because when the time is right, you will meet them. But there will be things that you might need to do before it happens. You might need to get a job, you might need to have certain experiences, you might need to build up the resources, or they may not be ready and so they need to do certain things. But when the time's right, you will have the things happen to you that you need to do. And intuition is the key. Trusting your intuition is what will move you along the path of synchronicity.
So when someone is not, let's say, finding Mr. Right or right now, depending on their choice, I'm not judging. When they're not able to do that, they get depressed and they're upset. And I can 100% understand that, because loneliness sets in. But what they're not understanding is there's certain key points in your life that you have to do. So when you have this depression, you're not actually going out and actively doing things. And so you're actively looking for somebody because you're depressed, but that may not be what you really need in your life.
It's also the fact that sometimes when you get what you want, it will block you from doing what you need to do. If I spent the first 33 years of my life trying to find a partner, and I was completely unable to do so. But if I had succeeded, then I wouldn't be doing any of this today, because I would have had no motivation and no sort of pull to go out and find out what was going on and find out the answers. Even bad things can be very important. For example, back in '82, I used to go to a gym, and during a warm-up I tore my shoulder. That never healed properly, so I spent years trying to find a solution to it, because it would always play up and cause me a lot of pain. And that shoulder was what led me to walking to this random massage therapy place and one of my first soul calls, but also what led me to be introduced to Bach flower remedies. If I had not damaged my shoulder, I would never have found out about Bach flower remedies, and they're the most potent healing tool I've ever come across.
So what would be the Bach flower remedy for someone that is looking for synchronicities in their lives but not quite seeing them yet?
Well, two of them, Serato, which helps with your intuition, and wild oats, which helps you with your direction in life.
So that's Serato and wild oat.
Yeah. Also, if you're wanting to be with somebody because you hate being alone, Heather will help you, because that's for fear of being alone.
And so we've got the three of them together will help you overcome certain issues in your life, to start seeing where things are lining up and where you're supposed to be going towards.
It will certainly help, of course, other remedies depending on certain things, but those other remedies which will help clarify your direction.
Okay.
Like what I took wild oats soon after discovering Bach flower remedies, and within a few minutes I suddenly thought, hey, I want to be a healer. A thought that had never occurred to me before then. It seems so obvious.
So how would someone learn about these Bach flower remedies for this?
Well, they could read the second half of the Empath guidebook, which is a free book which I've written about being an empath, and the second half is Bach flower remedies for empaths. So you just look up the particular symptom or the remedy itself, and it explains exactly what it does for you.
The book is on Amazon.com as well. Both of your books are, actually. And
so thanks, Jen, for the chat. And yeah, what's coming up for next week?
Next week is our podcast on psychic vampirism. How to understand psychic vampirism, what it is, and how to protect yourself against psychic vampires.
Okay, well, we'll see you all then. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, here are some others you might find interesting. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear about them. Leave a comment and maybe even a like. I rise like a phoenix.